Welcome to 100% Renewable, Pathways to Our Clean Energy Future. This is our annual update hosted by Sustainable Resilient Longmont that focuses on our transition to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Tonight, we have three speakers for you. We have David Hornbacher, who is the Executive Director of Longmont Power and Communications for the City of Longmont. And he's also one of Longmont's 2 Platte River Power Authority board members. We also have Longmont Mayor Joan Peck, who is our other Platte River Power Authority board member. And we'll have Tracy Burnett, State House Representative for District 12, which includes Longmont and several other L cities. Let's see. All right, so the way tonight will go is we'll start off with David Hornbacher, and he will give a bit more of the technical perspective of our transition to 100% renewable energy and explain some of the acronyms that we might all not immediately recognize for us. And then we'll move on to Mayor Joan Peck, and she'll speak more to how we do this as a community. And then after Mayor Peck, we will hear from Representative Tracy Burnett, and she will speak to the exciting things that are happening on a state level, because there's a lot happening on the state level. Once we're through that, we should have about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A system, and we have volunteers that will pick out kind of the questions that we get the most of and share those with us at the end of the broadcast. So with that said, I'd like to introduce properly David Hornbacher, who, as I mentioned before, is the Executive Director of Longmont Power and Communications, and he is one of Longmont's Platte River Power Authority board members. David Hornbacher has worked in Colorado utility sector for over 30 years. He joined Longmont Power and Communications in August of 2019 as executive director. In his current role, David oversees a team of 65 individuals dedicated to connecting the community to affordable, reliable, and environmentally responsible electric services. His team is focused on empowering our community's transition to a sustainable, carbon-free energy future powered by 100% renewable electric energy resources by 2030. And we're kind of lucky to have David, because previously he was director of the City of Aspen Utilities and Environmental Initiatives for 9 years, where he oversaw the city's water and electric service portfolios, which included hydroelectric operations, environmental health, climate action, and sustainability. And what makes David's experience unique is in 2015, he and his team at Aspen Utilities became the 3rd municipal electric utility district in the nation with 100% renewable electric energy. It was a community goal. So this is not his first rodeo. And everyone, please welcome David Hornbacher.
Good, I'm live. Ryan, thank you for that introduction. And I just want to thank all the members of Sustainable Resilient Longmont. I thought I'd start off with the acronyms of, SRL. And just very pleased to be here with you tonight. I see we have about 33 participants. So this is really exciting that I get to speak with you a bit and share with you some of the things that we're doing, some of the approaches. And so, as Ryan had mentioned, one of the goals we achieved in 2015 at Aspen was a 100% renewable energy portfolio. And I think what that leads into is that it's very possible and that there's no set formula for it. Otherwise, I would have just brought the formula forward and we would have signed up and off we went. But there is not a specific formula, but there's a lot of basics that we're all trying to work with. And so, what we're really talking about is an evolution here, an evolution of load, of how and when and to what extent we use energy, and how that load is growing with electrification, And also on generation, how do we transition from our current generation sources, which, a lot of those sources have a switch on. You need more of it, you switch it, or you turn the dial and up it goes. And you need less, you turn it down or you turn it off. Whereas the personalities of renewable energy are each very different. And that's what adds to, let's call it the, some of the challenges and really some of the excitement of moving this forward. And, when we look to the successes of our past, how successful utilities have been in general in delivering energy and delivering it reliably. And in our case here, we're the second lowest rates in the state of Colorado, have been that way for decades. And those are some of the great successes we've had in our past. And that's what helps inform us, but it's not our future. We need to capture the things that we did really well in all these years to ensure that reliability, to ensure a cost effect is something consistent with our community, and transition that to 100% renewable energy. So we'll leverage that experience and we'll form, let's call it the new formula, with measured ingenuity, creative solutions, technology adaptation, advancements, and risk management to get all of those things together. And so when I think of how we transition from where we're at now to in our near future, some of you have heard the word the duck curve, or really what you're talking about is how do you use energy? I mean, just think about it. At night, you're sleeping, very low energy use. Come, morning, we're all getting up and, doing different things. Maybe we're heading into the office. Maybe we're firing up our home office. We might do certain things during the day. And so it peaks up a little bit so you sort of start sleeping, it sort of comes up a little and then drops down at your house. And then you come home. And, up it goes. And that's sort of what they call the duck curve. And, here's where we all come home and, we want to make sure our house is comfortable. So it's at the right temperature. We're turning on the oven. Maybe we get that laundry going, the leftover dishes. We just drove home with our EV and we plugged it in. And so when you look at those things, and if we make no changes, that just keeps on making that curve higher and higher. And what that means is more and more resources. And if they're variable resources, it means more and more of those. And so for Karen's benefit, since I didn't do slides, I drew this up really quickly. So there's my duck curve. So you can sort of see from when you wake up, about midday here, and then you see this taller one. And so interesting challenge is that right now we're a summer peaking utility. And so come summer, whatever our peaks are, they're even higher. In fact, we had an all-time high peak this last summer. So when I look at this curve, I'm going to talk about three things really quickly. How do we start to drop that peak? So we're going to shave it here. How do we help to reshape it, move it into other areas? And ultimately, how do we take this shape and compare it to the renewable energy resources that we have and start to get them to synchronize? So right now we're using energy and up and down, and energy's been produced up and down. And so we're going to try and drop the peak a little so that maybe we don't have to go up quite as high. And at some point, what we're looking to do is try to synchronize that as best as we can, so that when we have a lot of renewable energy to place somewhere, we can find different devices, tools, needs within our community to send it there first. And likewise, if we start to get a big gap of a lot more energy needed and less renewable energy resources, are there tools that we have in here? Can we have that EV charge a little bit later or a little bit earlier? Do we preload the electric water heater? So we did that down here earlier in the day when there was wind was blowing, the sun was shining, and we start to preload different things. Did we cool the house just maybe a half hour before you came home because there's more renewable energy? And so over time, we're ultimately looking to see how we can synchronize these otherwise somewhat independent elements that are going on between generation and load. And what's really neat about this, and why I love talking with Sustainable Resilient Longmont, is these are activities that we do. I mean, these are decisions by us as customers, as electric user, between what we have in our house, how we utilize that, what types of other devices we might have in there that allow some controllability to synchronize. And so we have a role in this. So this is something that we can do together. And, as the future, which is really, from here on, there are opportunities to participate and really to be part of that evolution. So I just wanted to ground a little bit with the synchronization, because ultimately, when I look out 3 to 5 to 8 years as we get to our goal, it's going to be absolutely imperative we start to get really good at synchronizing more of when renewable energy is available and how and where we use it or store it or preload or other things like that. And so the next question was a little bit about PRPA progress. So Platte River Power Authority progress. And so I'm going to talk just briefly about the last integrated resource plan. And so what has happened since that was done? And so multiple things have happened. One, in agreeing to the last IRP, we shortened the periods between which we do these integrated resource plans, which is really that thinking of, here's our goal, what do we need to do to get that goal? And with each IRP, we're dialing it in and dialing it in, because we've also got the benefit of learning more, additional technology coming online and being viable and so forth. And so what we agreed to do is shorten the time frame between each IRP. So they're going to be about every 3 years. And so that means that we've got 2 full IRPs plus some time before our 2030 goal, because really decisions need to be made before 2030 to be enacted and to test it and so forth. So that's one thing. The software has been changed to a Plexus system, which really is much more effective at increasing renewables and generation, different types of generation, renewable energy generation, and how to model that. And so we had the somewhat more traditional software that's already been upgraded. Energy imbalance markets. So when you enter a market, when Platte River enters a market, instead of just relying on the things close to home, you open your ups to this geographic area. Whoops, I'm off the screen. This geographic area, because the wind may not be blowing here, but it might be blowing, way to the east or way to the west, especially as the sun is changing and the earth is heating and cooling, winds kick up. So if we can pick up where wind is blowing as it starts to slow down here, or likewise, if we have excess wind and other places are low, there's, how do we exchange it? Same thing with solar. It may be dark here right now, but it's not as dark as you move west. How do we share in a market, and move those resources across larger geographic units? So Platte River is dedicated to doing that, and they're working on being a partner in one of the emerging energy imbalance markets. So that's huge. They tied their roundhouse wind, which is sort of at the north edge of Colorado into Wyoming, direct tie right into Rawhide, which is really where all the where energy currently is produced by Rawhide, the coal-fired plant. But when that's shut down, we have all those transmission lines and so forth and transformers. So that's a great hub to move that energy out to the 4 cities. Here's what I think is really exciting. Well, they also finished the Prairie Flat Solar, and that included a 2 megawatt battery. So we have the Platte River system. It's small by comparison to the overall system, but we have a 2 megawatt battery that is in service and they are using all the time. So what they're trying to do is learn how to best use that and how to get good at it to determine, how do you utilize that technology as one of the many tools. There is currently, they have signed quite a while ago a power purchase agreement for another 150 megawatts of solar. North of us here, a little bit east of the highway. So, a little Fort Collinish in distance, and then off to the east. And just to compare and contrast, the city of Longmont's absolute highest electric peak moment in time was this last summer at 189 megawatts. So this facility at 150 megawatts, if the sun is completely shining, there's going to be a moment in time that it's about full capacity for just Longmont's load. Now we know that, it changes throughout the day and so forth. So it doesn't meet Longmont's load, but at a moment in time, it's going to be, at least for that moment, it's doing miraculous things. Also, and so that's in a permitting phase right now. So, things are moving forward with that. They're working on the permits and they've already got the land identified and so forth. So they're working for that phase. Next, they have a 250 megawatt request for proposal out there. So that went out a couple months ago, and they're now reviewing the proposals. But that proposal was pretty open-ended on physical location. But it allows a lot of different solar type providers, energy providers, to put together really sound, competitive and reliable energy, well, we hope, and the opportunity to add some batteries to that, to try and, be able to store some of that energy to when you need it most. So that's really exciting. So if you look at that, 150 megawatts and another 250, you're sitting at 400 megawatts. Let's see, I got 10 minutes left, right? I'll keep going. So that's quite a bit moving forward. The other thing too, that if you haven't looked at it, that is a more recent addition at Platte River, if you go to their website, and right up top, it tells you who are we, what do we do, etc. If you click on the part that says, what do we do, there's a couple really interesting areas. One is generation. It's sort of static, so it's interesting from the standpoint it tells you what the energy sources are and what their nameplate capacities are. But also what's really cool is there's a second item called current energy production. So if you pull that up, you will see virtually in real time, I think every 15 minutes, exactly where the energy resources are. And if we look at today, for example, we peaked right about 4 o'clock for solar at 49.6 megawatts, which is pretty substantial. That's of the 52 megawatts that's connected. Wind peaked at 166.6 megawatts. And so those are, substantial, and they're both tapering down right now. Right now, as we speak, their combined output is about 88 megawatts. So it's really cool if you like to look at that from almost real-time perspective. So it's Platte River's site. Who are we? Or no, I'm sorry, what do we do? And if you click on that, current energy production. There was another question on advanced metering infrastructure. So you're going to hear it as AMI, but sometimes you hear AMR, which is automated meter reading. That's sort of it's not a very, it's a system that we currently use for our water meters, but we have a much more closer to real-time dynamic system with advanced metering infrastructure. So think of it right now, when you're trying to solve all these things, data is really meaningful to really know how energy is used and so forth. I drew my duck curve, but our current meters are just continuously spin, and once a month we read them and we get the output for that whole month. So I cannot tell you how much energy was used by all residential at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 2 o'clock or in the middle of the night. I can tell you if you're in a car, I can tell you how far you drove that month. But I couldn't tell you if you went 100 miles per hour for 15 minutes, so I have to have a motor to do that, or if you just plodded along at 15 miles per hour, just constant all the time. So with the new AMI system, advanced metering infrastructure, we will be able to gather data up to 15-minute increments. And so that is a very important tool to not understanding our load, but is also gateway to some of these other discussions that we're having about how to synchronize. And so that's very exciting. And our contract is with Landis & Gyr for those that like that type of detail. And if you're looking up Landis & Gyr, and that's Landis, Landis, and Gyr is GYR, you go to their website and you click on truly their next generation meter. It's just coming out of the lab. It's the Ravello. And for all our residential services, we're bringing the technology of the future in today with the Ravello meter. And so, when we're building the system, it's really about what other types of capacities that we have in the future that may really help enable us to the challenge we had before of 100% renewable energy. On some of the other actions is, let's talk solar for a moment. There's certainly different people that have solar on their roof. And, what's really, if what's really great about rooftop solar is it's something you can do. So if you just like buying an electric vehicle, If you have the capacity and the interest, it's something that's available to you now. You don't really need a utility approval, or, you obviously need your permits to put it on your roof, but it's something that's available to you. And so it's involvement, it's homeowner, different types of homeowner cost and benefit. With solar as it's currently done, we don't have really ability to store it, and can't really tell you very well consistently the production level. And so when I really think about solar rooftop, I'm really thinking solar, let's call it next generation 2.0. And I always think about solar and storage, solar and storage, solar and storage. That's where we get the biggest benefit out of that type of energy embedded in our system. We're also working on community solar this year. I don't have the full shape of it right now, but that may be another way for folks to participate, that they don't own their property. The cost of solar is maybe not quite reachable, or they aren't going to be at the house long enough, or they're in a rental unit or so forth, but other ways for us in our community to participate in that. And so that's coming later in 2022, and I hope to be under contract for that, but the build time might be a little longer depending on supply chain. Electrification, we've got a project with Habitat for Humanity that they're still building 8 of the 10 units, but we're working with them. It's all electric, and there's going to be different devices within the house that measure, monitor, adapt, and adjust. So we're looking at that as a demonstration to really learn from it. And also we have staff working on siting a demonstration electric kitchen within the community. And the idea there is, if you've been thinking about the current generation of electric cooking, which is pretty much the instant on and so forth, as compared to your current electric or even your gas stove, we are planning to find a space that you could go and use and try that out. And so whether it's you, or whether you've got your family there, or family and friends, we're just trying to find a friendly location that you can experiment with that, and then you can make a good decision. We're certainly looking into energy storage. Oh, and we're doing a BYOT, bring your own thermostat. If any of you are an ecobee in your house right now, you will probably get a text message or something from ecobee asking if you want to participate in a demonstration project. So that means you'd have an ecobee thermostat, and you'd have probably air conditioning, some sort of controllable load. So if you meet that criteria, you might get an email. Again, it's demonstration. ecobee was just one of the groups we're working with. We hope to have 200 thermostats out of that. We're benchmarking our buildings, 20,000 square foot or over. It's sort of like the basics. If you don't do that measurement, you don't know what how you're producing, sort of like an EPA rating on your vehicle. And lastly, but not least, the EV charging. The city has several EV charging places, but it's phenomenal what the private sector has done already. There are well over 60 charging stations in existence in Longmont at this very moment. So if you just go out and do a little web searching, they are, I don't want to say everywhere, but they feel like they're everywhere. So it really starts to beg the question, how far does the public do versus how far the private does? But private has gone there. But one of the things we're trying to be more conscious of is the multifamily areas where you don't own, or maybe you have a condo there, and if you're the first EV there and there's no charger, is there a pathway that we can help some of these multifamilies in the near future to get that charger there? It doesn't rely on 10 or 20 or 10% of everybody with a charger. So those are just a quick overview of where we're at. And I know we have an exciting next 2 presenters, so I look forward to listening to them, and thank you for your time this evening.
All right, David, thank you so much for explaining where we're at and where we're going. Everybody, just a reminder, we will have David back for Q&A later. So I've seen some good questions come in already. Keep them coming. So next up, we have Mayor Joan Peck. Joan Peck and her family moved to Longmont in 1977, where she worked for the St. Vrain Valley School District for 13 years before owning a home daycare business. Once her children were grown, she worked 7 years at IBM in service support and backup and recovery. Mayor Peck first became Councilwoman Peck in 2016, where she focused on serving Longmont's underserved, protecting our environment, and holding RTD accountable to build fast tracks commuter rail to Longmont. Councilwoman Peck was elected mayor in November of 2021 and is currently in her first term as Longmont's mayor. Mayor Peck is also one of Longmont's 2 Platte River Power Authority members. And Mayor Peck, take it away. Let's see.
I'm muted, so I need to start over. Thank you, Ryan and SRL board for allowing me to speak at this 100% annual renewable energy webinar. That is a mouthful, I'll tell you. I'm really honored to be on the PRPA Platte River Power Authority board. I've only been to 3 meetings, but I found out how engaged and committed to meeting the 100% renewable target goal, rather, by all of the city's mayors and utility directors. Everyone is. The thing that I am seeing that is different, as I've been told, because I've never been on the board before, is that these mayors and utility directors from the other cities really want to be engaged in the process. They want it to be an integrated board where we all have input. It's been stressed several times in the 3 meetings that I've been to that the cities own this power authority. The power of the utility is managed and by Jason Frisbee, the CEO and director, but we actually own it. So it is the board that directs Platte River on how we want to go and how to get there. What has come out of it, though, is that everyone is figuring it out. As David had said, it's evolutionary, but it's really difficult to transition. And everyone's really excited about it and very vocal. So it's a fun place to be. But the other thing is that no one really knows how to do it because it is brand new and working through that. We need to go fast, but very, very cautiously, because we don't want to look back in 10 or 15 years and say, we shouldn't have done it that way. We lost efficiency and we wasted time. So figuring this out is very, very interesting. David is the technical guy, as you've heard. I am there to support the city, support David, and help with just the integration part of helping us all move forward. So this is very exciting time. And I have no doubt that David Hornbacher and Jason Frisbee can lead Longmont to 100% renewable in the near future. So I just have these list of questions, Ryan, that you sent that the board came up with. I'm just going to go through them. What steps should be taken to get Longmont to 100% electrification and also electrifying household water heating and just house heating? We have started in Longmont an electrification committee, figuring out ways that we can work to get our city moving toward electrification. The big conversation has been on heating pumps. And this is really an expensive transition for people to go from their current heating system to heat pumps. So I have been trying to figure out, as well as the committee, on how do we do that. When I was directed to the Senate bill, what is it, 051, and it is to exempt heat pumps from state sales and use taxes. This is really important for huge development, because if they don't have to pay the state sales and use tax, it makes it a lot more affordable, especially if you're putting in 30 units or an apartment building. What we have to convince developers is that this could be a savings for them down the line, especially if they are going to be the owners of the development or the the development or, I'm sorry, my phone started ringing. I had to turn it over so I wouldn't watch it. Or the apartment complex, that they would save money down the line, and with the sales and use tax, they would probably save money on the infrastructure that the city would have to do to put in gas for their heating units. So I'm really excited about that. The other good thing about SB 1051 is that a town or a city can change their ordinance for local sales tax by resolution or by an amendment to eliminate use and sales tax locally, so that they could save both on the state and local to put in these heat pumps. So that's pretty exciting. And I think those are the steps that we should take to get us to where we need to go. The money is going to have to come from the state. And there is a lot of money, which I'm sure Rep. Bernett will tell us about. Then the next thing we were going to tackle was how changes in building codes could be adopted for new housing to be ready for EV charging and eliminating gas. We've already given direction 2 council meetings ago for staff to bring back our design standards. And within those design standards, we can amend them to build green. And it would probably be a menu of things that developers could choose from to build green. But also, the other thing that is exciting to me in Senate Bill 051 is that there is a portion of that bill that through an architectural fund, which I didn't know the state had, if the developer chooses green building standards, green building properties, the architectural firm will send someone out to make sure that they meet the standards of the state's green building. And then there will be some remuneration from the architectural fund to make that affordable to build. So we need to make that, we need to make our developers and our planning department aware of these things to encourage, and that's how we can incentivize. We can incentivize green building now by reducing or eliminating fees on permits, but that isn't enough. That's not going to give them enough money to really build. So I am looking for state funding to address all of those things. So the other thing that was asked was about Costco. How can we incentivize Costco to put solar on their rooftops? Again, we can only do it through taxes, eliminating permits, very small things within the city. But going back to some of the state funding, if they use that as part of their building green, then money can come out of that architectural fund, either in tax incentives or rebates. I don't know how they would do it, but there is a lot of money. I also, this whole week, the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners Coalition usually goes to Washington, D.C. to talk to all of our congressmen and senators. But this week we had a fly-in, which means that we've been talking to them one by one on Zoom meetings. Yesterday, we talked to Congressman Ed Perlmutter, and I asked him how we could incentivize on a larger scale for green building. And he said that the energy department in the state, through the ARPA funds, through the ARPA funds that the federal government has put down to the state, the energy department has quite a few dollars in their budget. And we could, with advocacy and perhaps a late submitted bill, ask for funds for solar panels, both residential, developers, and commercial. And those funds are there. I don't know how to do it. Perhaps we could have some advocacy on the part of SRL to come up with a way that we can go to the state, either through a late bill that perhaps Rep. Bernett would put through to get some of that funding. So that's the only way that I know that Costco can be incentivized to put solar on, or any development, whether it's the school district. They've got a ton of schools that they could hopefully get some incentives to solarize their schools. So what can be done for low-income residents to be included in solutions? This is interesting. I think that there's also some money through HUD for the low-income residents. But I am thinking in the city, these are just ideas, that perhaps we could use our affordable housing fund to use as a lien for banks to lend money to low-income residents under the HUD definition, to be able to put in some of the electrification that they need in their homes, be it through heat pumps, through a neighborhood solar farm, any other ideas that actually David could help us come up with. And the other thing that we need, because as we move forward with all of these big ideas, what we are finding is that we don't have enough installers who know how to install heat pumps, who know how to transition from the oil and gas industry into solar and wind, making wind turbines, how to install solar. I would like for the city to partner with Front Range Community College to help with some of that upfront tuition, to retrain people to be able to help us get what we need installed, and perhaps have some kind of a caveat that they need to work in the field for a certain number of years before they get their tuition paid for. So those are just some ideas, is how can we move forward? And then the other thing that was asked was, how can we help or work with landlords to reduce their carbon footprint on their rental properties, including adding solar panels? This is difficult because there's not much we can do for the private sector if they have already, if it is an old or a pre-built apartment complex, going in and having them redo the boiler system or putting some kind of solar on the entire thing is very, very expensive. And unless there is some federal money or state money, I don't at this point know how the city can really incentivize them to undertake that cost. If it is a holding that a management company is going to have on for years, they can probably, they definitely would see the cost savings over time from using gas to electrification or solar. But there's always, through the county, programs for adding solar to your properties. I think this is a real exciting time, and I am so happy that SRL is on the front of this. David mentioned EV charging stations, and the city does have several in our city, but it is a bigger issue that the Denver Regional Council of Governments has taken on. And there is a plan to put over 70 charging stations along some of our superhighways. I'm interested as to how that's going to work, since it takes quite a while to charge an electrical vehicle. The other question that came up in new development, how can we incentivize getting it ready for electrification, EV chargers, et cetera? And I did mention that through the design standards, but I feel that getting it ready would be actually mandating through the city codes that they get the electricity, the amps coming into the house to, I think it's 250 amps in order to have a charging station, or 230, to tell them to put in a charging station right now doesn't make a lot of sense, since different types of or models of electric cars take different types of charging stations. Again, that's not my field of expertise, but I would think just having them put in enough electricity to And the only reason I mention this is that I had just had to do that. My house was built in the 60s and there wasn't enough amps coming in to charge a car and use the electricity for the house as well. So they had to come in, and this was new to me, and increase the number of amps coming in order to do that. So we could do that in our building codes. That is about all I have, and I don't think I took up my 20 minutes. David actually covered a lot of what I was going to say, so it is he is the one. I am brand new to PRPA. I am loving it. I do want to say what I did hear on some of these meetings with the senators and congressmen this week is that nonprofits are really good activists and events, but they don't seem to get things moving. And I would love SRL, especially if there's dollars that are not accounted for in the city, to advocate for some of those once we have a project, to help us advocate and go after some of those funds. It's always the squeaky wheel. I'm sure that Rep. Bernett can tell us how we can do that and where to go, what bills will give us the dollars, and how big of a project does it need to be. So I'm putting a lot on her plate right now, but that's really about all I have at the moment, Ryan. So
Thank you very much, Mayor Joan Peck. Yeah, that was very
Thank you.
informative, and we will be back to you with some questions. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Representative Tracy Burnett of State House District 12, which includes Longmont and some of the other L towns around here. Representative Bernett is a computer industry expert, entrepreneur, engineer, and mom from Longmont. She received an engineering degree from Cornell University and a Harvard MBA. She helped lead the effort to revitalize the Butterfly Pavilion and led our center's homelessness prevention efforts during the Great Recession, helping more than 16,000 area families get back on their feet. As a world-class runner and veteran of 36 marathons, Tracy knows it takes hard work, perseverance, and determination to build a better world for all of us. Representative Tracy Burnett, please take it away.
Well, hi, everybody. You know, I can't wait until we can get back in person, because all I'm doing is sitting here looking at myself, but I know you're all out there. And I have to say that part of the time when the rest of the meeting was going on, I was trying to eat my dinner, but I kept hearing my name. So you'll have to, Ryan, you'll have to like tee up some of the questions that were sent to me. But I know Joan did a really good, Mayor Peck did a really good job. So what I'd like to do is talk about a little bit about the things that the legislature did last year and some of the things we're doing this year. And just so you know, the sausage making process does take a while. So some of the things I'll be a little bit, I won't tell you as much about because, they haven't been read over and all that stuff. So anyway, so last year, I'm so glad that we've talked about heat pumps and things like that. There were a couple bills that I had on my radar that I actually passed. One of them was HB 1238. And this is a gas energy efficiency bill. And it basically, why do you care about that if we're talking about renewables? Well, half the way to get to help us get to renewables is into net zero, future is energy efficiency. And so this bill is a gas energy efficiency bill, but it also provides a path for people to get onto clean heat in the future. And what was important to me too is there is also help for everybody, the people who are struggling to make ends meet, to get on that path. And it is for, I should say, this is for investor-owned gas utilities. And another bill that I did is Senate Bill 264. I did that with Senator Hansen. And this is called, it's a clean heat bill, clean heat plans for utilities. It requires utilities, including municipal utilities that are serving over 90,000 customers. So I don't know if Longmont's quite there, but it requires them to submit clean heat plans that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions in buildings and homes by 22% by 2030. And there's another bill, a beneficial electrification bill that basically does it again is really fostering getting us to clean, electrifying our buildings. The way these three bills all work together, and it's really to get at that hardest nut, what I've called the hardest nut to crack, and that is decarbonizing our buildings, electrifying them, getting off of gasoline, which is natural gas, which is methane. So those are some of the bills we ran last year. There's another very important bill. It was SB 230. This was a bill that I did with Senator Hansen and others. It's provided $40 million of stimulus money. We had this big stimulus money last year, $40 million, 30 million of which goes toward a green bank. And the green bank is to spur renewable energy efforts throughout the state. So those are some of the really big things we did that last year. But we don't stop. I don't stop. I no longer run marathons and now run track, but I'm not stopping here. So this year, one of the things I'm really excited about, this is a bill that has been read over. It actually will be heard in the House Energy and Environment Committee next Thursday. So you guys can come, you can testify, you can sit in and listen. You don't have to come to the Capitol. This is a microgrid roadmap. And what this is, I did, what's bothered me, what's concerned me is, actually, this is the third time in my life that I have been involved with climate crisis related relief efforts. First with Hurricane Sandy back in New York City. I was trying to run the New York City Marathon and ended up doing relief effort instead. And then the horrible floods that hit Longmont in 2013, that's what it was. And then the Marshall Fire is my district too. So one of the things that I learned when I was back in New York City in Hurricane Sandy was certain kind of facilities. You think of critical facilities, you always think of hospitals and things like that. But there's other kind of critical facilities, grocery stores and community centers and things like that. And so it really got me thinking about what is grid resilience? How can we make our grid more resilient? And also, so not only to, disasters like wildfires and floods, but also things like grid reliability. There's everyday occurrences that happen, tree limbs and, animal interaction, all those kind of things. There's certain parts of our state that that have unreliable power. And so I call it like wildfires to squirrels. How can we really improve the resiliency of our grid? And so what this bill does is a large stakeholder. Let's have this big conversation and first figure out what facilities are critical facilities. Things like grocery stores, things like data centers, community centers, and have a conversation and figure out what are those things that are critical facilities that are really important to keep up all the time. And it's also including people who are on oxygen, If your house doesn't have electricity and you're on oxygen, that can be a real problem. Also, identifying what communities are more vulnerable to both grid disruption due to disasters, as well as they're underserved. And so figuring out those kind of things and being very strategic about it. How do we fit microgrids into this? How can microgrids help improve the grid resiliency? And when I think microgrids, to tell you the truth, diesel backup power, that can be considered a microgrid. But what I'm looking at is how can we go beyond that and help Colorado meet its greenhouse gas reduction goals. And that's through, of course, solar and storage and things like that. Now, a lot of people think, well, why don't you just start building these things? And what I've learned is that it's really important to say, where do they make sense? I mean, microgrids can be everything from, a single resident that has some solar panels, maybe a Tesla Powerwall or some other kind of storage. It could be a campus, it could be a community, it could be a neighborhood. Though all those are different kinds of microgrids, and there's a lot of things that have to be figured out in what's the best way to build them and deploy them. Think about things like rate structures. If you're plugging this microgrid into the greater grid, what is a fair rate structure for those who are using the microgrid, but also maybe ratepayers that are not as benefiting as much from that? Lots and lots of things. So what this bill does is provides it's laying out a roadmap. Where does it make sense to deploy microgrids? What are the costs and benefits and considerations in each of these types of instances, a single resident to a whole community? What are the barriers to deploying these microgrids? And then coming up with a timeline and recommendation for future legislation and rules and financial incentives. So I know I've talked a lot about it, but obviously I'm pretty excited about that bill. So that's my microgrid roadmap. There's another really big bill that I'm running this year, and it's model energy codes. I'm really excited about this. I'm doing in collaboration with the Colorado Energy Office, and it will be introduced very, very shortly. It's really it's looking forward at what do we need to do to, spur the sustainable infrastructure in the future, and spur faster transition to reduced and fossil-free buildings. So there's 3 codes to this, and I'm not going to tell you all the details because we're still putting our final edits in on this bill. But the first one I can talk a lot more about. By 2025, communities need to adopt and enforce 2021 IECC codes, plus electric vehicle, heat pump, and solar ready. So this is only for new buildings or buildings that require a building permit. This is not for things like, if your water heater dies, your furnace dies, you have to do this stuff. So I want to make that very clear, but it's very forward looking. The next thing I'm going to be a little bit more quiet about because this bill hasn't been released yet, but by 2030, that we have near zero carbon, and that by that it can be an all electric building or multiple paths for mixed fuel use. We can't ban gas here in Colorado. I mean, that's just is impossible to do. But we can say, if you do want gas into your house to, heat your house or heat your food or something like that, let's think about what are the things we can do so that it is a greener option. Okay. And then the third code, this is a voluntary green code. For communities who want to go beyond these other 2 codes and really do things like address indoor air quality or embody the decarbonizing their the building materials and embodied carbon, those kind of things. That's what that bill goes about. So I know that Mayor Peck already talked about a bill that Senator Hansen is running about exempting air source and ground source heat pumps from property taxes. There's another bill that is being run by Representative Alex Valdez, House Bill 22-1218. And this is fostering EV charging stations in buildings that are say 25,000 square feet or more, or they have at least 25 living quarters. It's really that those larger buildings. How do we get more EV charging stations, parking spaces into those kind of buildings? And I know that Mayor Peck did talk about state funding for green building. That is going through the sausage making process right now. I have not seen the bill yet, but there is definitely conversations going on about that. So with that, I just, I don't know how long I've taken, but anyway, I'd love to open up to questions.
All right, Representative Bernett, thank you so much. We have lots of questions. So if I can get the other panelists to unmute, get your cameras back on, and we will start running through the questions. One thing I do want to do before we do that, though, is I'm going to thank all of you for stepping up to public service and committing to serve your neighbors and lead. It is it's not easy work, and we literally couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. And with that said, we will move on to some questions. First one's first. What can we as citizens and as SRL do to best support your initiatives? You know, how can we build the political will and express it to support your work?
I could start off from the state level. There's a lot you can do. And I've said this a lot of times. I really believe that change happens at the grassroots, the community, the state level and beyond. And let me just give you like one example. My daughter is an architect, and she got me thinking about this thing called embodied carbon. There's a lot of industrial processes to do building codes, and I'm sorry, to produce things like concrete and steel. It takes a lot of energy, and it produces a lot of greenhouse gases. And so this whole thing of reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions it takes to produce those materials is something, she said embodied carbon. I went, that's kind of interesting. Well, one of my bills that I passed last year, House Bill 1303, requires the state architect and the Department of Transportation to use greener construction materials in state funded transportation and building products. Well, this hit the national news. I have had legislators from around the country call me and ask about. I actually have a meeting with Canada set up here soon. But the really cool thing was last Sunday I was on TV, Denver Channel 7, because there's this new company that came in. They heard about this bill, and they came in 3 months ago, and they do something that reduces the carbon, or it greens up greens up concrete. Let me put it that way. And they've already installed this technology in 9 plants here in Colorado. This is the kind of stuff. So it started with my daughter saying embodied carbon, and it's going around the world in 1 year. That's pretty cool. So it is really important. So what can you do? Well, first of all, when these bills come up, like the bill that I have next week, if you care about microgrids, tell your, look at the people who are going to be listening to on that committee. Write them an email especially if you're a constituent. Send an email. You can testify. Those are things. And in terms of testifying, what really, really gets to us is stories. Tell your stories about why this is important to you. We hear facts and figures all the time. Tell the story, make it personal, make me cry about why you care about this. So anyway, I'll let the rest of you talk about what you guys can do.
That's great. So Mayor Peck, what can we do as residents and advocates to help clear the path for your work and support what you and David are trying to accomplish with PRPA?
Sure, thank you. First, I want to thank Tracy, Rep. Bernett, for that bill, because as we talk in the Northwest Mayors Commissioners a coalition, and at DRCOG and at Commuting Solutions, we have plans for a lot of roads being enlarged, et cetera. And I think of all that cement that is going to be laid down, it just makes me cringe. So if you can boost that and make it go faster, that would be great. So what can SRL do? This just what Tracy recommended, any advocacy and testifying. But we do have a group called CLEAN that meets at 1 o'clock every day on Monday. And Marilyn Hughes is the one that really brings that together. And what they do, Mike Foote started it with Marilyn Hughes to teach people how to testify, to be honest, because the reason that lobbyists really get to the bills and get their way is because they know how to testify. So that's what CLEAN was started for. It's at 1 o'clock every day. And if you know, no, I'm sorry, on Mondays. And they go through all the bills that have been presented. And it's a really good discussion that they have on the phone, and sign up to testify, write letters. But as SRL, even though you testify individually, I always think as an organization that if SRL as a sustainable resilient organization sent a letter from the board, from the director, that has a lot of power as well. And it also tells our elected officials that we're listening, that we're out here. We hear what's going on and we have a voice. So
I'd like to say too that I try to sit in on those SRL meetings when I can, just pop in. I've been too busy of late, but I do love sitting in on that just so people can talk directly to me.
Right. So there you go. That's my 2 cents.
Awesome. David, anything to add?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm just fascinated listening to Mayor Peck and to Tracy. And, I already brought up on my screen Senate Bill 21-230, so I'm looking at that in the background, one of the ones you talked about. But to the question at hand, wow, great question. This is a super forum for it. When you look back, LPC, Longmont Power and Communications, LPC, it's been an exceptional problem solver. We talked about second lowest rates in the state. So that positions us really well for our challenges. We've got 4 nines of reliability. We're reliable 99.99993% of the time. Hard to beat that, even though we do have squirrels and branches. And we're on a pathway to 100% renewable. That sounds to me like an exceptional community-owned municipal utility. However, the problems we have coming forward are really shared issues. And it's really about how do we work together to achieve those, not just about excellence in Longmont Power and Communications. So input is exceptional, whether it's these types of meetings or you want to host something specific to an issue or a problem and do some problem solving around and get ideas and be very open to that. Clearly, anything coming directly to me or to Mayor Peck, I think is a great way to do things. And I'm thinking also with some of these other programs we talked about, maybe we can be wiser at utilities to, as we get ready to launch these things, check in with SRL. Are any of you interested in participating? Do you know friends? Do you want to do some sort of, shall we partner and do a community event? So different ways. Those are not the most, let's say, common thinking in a utility, but it's really the thinking that we need to push into and utilize when we're really doing something that needs so much community input and support. So I would sort of focus on those 3 areas, and to the extent that we can share more with SRL and others, I'd be happy to do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Good answers all around. Okay, next question. This is the hot one. Will PRPA be able to meet 100% renewable energy by 2030? Is the will there? Is it possible?
Gosh, I think I get to answer that one. It's a great question. In fact, that was some of the concerns raised at the last IRP that we completed, or Platte River completed, and myself on the board, is that it got to a point of 90% renewable. It embraced the three factors as far as it got us there reliably, financially sustainability, and got to the 90% of the goal. And that is one reason why I pushed so hard to get 2 more IRPs going, because of the urgency, the decision-making, the timeline that it has to do that. So I think working together and working to get that synchronization figured out, yes, I think it's possible to get to 100% renewable energy. Each one of these next IRPs is going to dial it in even more and a little bit more. So hence the urgency of getting those things done. But I gotta say, it will be a challenge. And how I see that challenge here locally is when I look at our resources we have in LPC and our budgeting and so forth, my goal is to transform Longmont so that we have the capacity to alter our load profile about a 10%. So basically, you always hear 10% is the last hardest of the renewable energy, because that's where you have to put in more and more of these variable resources, right? To make sure you get a little out of them to meet your final need. And that's expensive and not as reliable. And so we got to fill that gap. And I think part of filling that gap is at home, hence the bring your own thermostat, hence looking at electric water heaters, hence looking at solar 2.0 with storage. So that's the key that's one of the keys to get there. But I have to say it'll be a challenge, but we're on top of it.
All right. Okay, next question. This is probably for you as well, David. Should residents and businesses install solar on their facilities and their homes, or wait for the city to reach renewable, 100% renewable by 2030? And I guess, like, more broadly, what is the role that rooftop solar will play, and I guess distributed energy resources in general? How can they help us move forward, or will they?
That is a very complex decision, or answer, I should say. And I don't think there's a clear-cut answer right now. Solar, putting solar on your house right now is absolutely, something you can do, a right you have, and an opportunity that you have. And it may or may not work for you. What I'd like to see with solar, to get to the points of how can solar really help us on a much broader, not so much scale, but more impactful, is one, we start to think more about solar plus battery, and we start to go along those lines. Also, community solar, I think, is a great transition. I'd like to get that going so you have a choice. And then obviously we talked about some of these other larger solar fields. When you are just looking at installed cost, nothing else, building these large solar fields that, like we talked about at Platte River Power Authority, are incredibly cost effective. They're more than half the cost of anything we put on a roof. So if you're only looking at dollars, that's what you're looking at. But it's back to how do they integrate and help on the local grid? And that's where we're putting together a smart grid roadmap within the utilities, so that when you ask me this question next time, I actually have a rock solid answer. But today it's a little bit more solar plus battery, some community solar, solar in mass, and then we get through our roadmap and we can determine, and the advanced metering infrastructure, so we can start getting solar in areas that have issues with delivering energy there. And so instead of going for a traditional solution of we're just going to build more wires, dig more ground, extend more wires, we start to place these distributed energy resources strategically. That's where I want to go, is the strategic side.
Very nice.
I see Joan. Oh, wow.
Tracy.
Everybody wants this one.
Everybody. Joan, go for it.
So, and David will have to correct me if I don't, if I am saying this incorrectly. He is the technical guy, I am not. It is my understanding, and I am using my son as an example here, since Tracy says stories are always good. He put solar on his house. He lives in Florida, totally solar, rolled back his energy. He wasn't using any electrical energy. But what was happening was, as more people individually put solar on, and it wasn't coming from a solar farm or a solar array, the lower socioeconomic group of people were at a disadvantage because their power was not all coming from solar or from renewable energy. So the electricity that they were getting from coal and gas raised their rates. If I'm making any sense. So one of the questions that was asked was, is it a good idea for people to put solar on their house? Yes and no. From a city advantage of everybody going 100% renewable, we need the big solar farms. We need the big solar arrays that the lower socioeconomic residents can draw from as well. Otherwise, it's just an individual savings unless we have the capacity to take what they're not using and put on a storage or put back on through the grid to help everybody. And I don't know how that works, but I do understand the theory. So.
Yeah, I just have to say these are exactly the things that my microgrid roadmap wants to dive deeper into. Everybody thinks, oh, just, roll out these microgrids. You have brought up exactly the issue. What is fair for those folk who do not have their own, microgrid or solar, installations? Exactly that. And where do you put them out? Where do you put these microgrids? David, you talked about places where it may be hard to get that last mile in. And so these are the things. I'm not going to say that this roadmap is going to solve everything. I look at it as this is an onion, and peeling back a whole bunch of layers and start laying out what are those big things we want to tackle now, and then going beyond that. And I have to say too, I'm looking at it at some point, we're talking about, load management too in the future. So yeah, that's just why we need a strategic plan to do this.
If I can just, good points, if I could just add one thing to compare and contrast. We talked about that 150 megawatt field that is going in up in northern Colorado to serve all the Platte River Power Authority. And if you compare that to our peak was 189 megawatts for Longmont, including all commercial, all industrial. So if every house was optimally turned towards the sun and had no trees and no anything else, so if it just looked very monolithic like that, that one solar field at peak, no different than peak at your house, would at that moment in time serve every house in Longmont and then some. And so it's being built in mass, and you can imagine the challenges of trying to do it that much on every house. That's why you got to figure out how they best work together. And that's why I get excited at both. I get excited about local because it's something people can do, and it has some other more local benefits. And then, so you're part of this evolution. And then when I look at it in mass, it's like that hits really strong, the reliability and cost effectiveness targets that we, and plus the goal, right? The goal. So
I'd like to add just one other thing too. I attended a sort of a welcoming thing. Hopefully, we're trying to get a green hydrogen company to come to Colorado. And the reason I bring this, green hydrogen is another renewable energy source produced by using renewable energy, and it's for places that are hard. It can be used in places where wind and solar doesn't work very well, and also for industrial processes where there's very high energy needs, and also heavy trucks and things like that. So I just wanted to bring that up. This is another thing that the state is looking at. You know, the technology is coming along, but you know, it's another thing that we need to look to meet that last, you know, what 10% or whatever of what we're trying to do to get to a sustainable infrastructure.
I'll keep piling on with questions in this realm. You know, there's a lot of excitement and interest, it appears, with our attendees around the microgrid bill and just generally talking about local power generation. You know, in talking to community solar gardens, you know, there is concern that local control is going to be lost, and that utility districts like PRPA intend to like manage and control community solar gardens. I guess, can you speak to how we can address these fears and maybe expand on how legislation can help local power generation grow?
Well, I don't want to answer the questions because the whole point of this is to figure out what those questions are and come up with recommendations on how that is. I have learned some things in talking to, and I should say this whole roadmap it's developer agnostic. It's you know, people who want to develop their own microgrids. It's question is asking everybody, to utilities. One of the things I think that's really that I've learned about utilities, that utilities are interested in this, it's kind of hard for them to sometimes find where the best place is to do a microgrid, but they've also learned that a lot of people, they may develop the microgrid, but they don't want to maintain it. And so that there's things like, okay, who maintains it? Who maintains the transmission line between that microgrid and the greater grid? What, you know, and making sure that you know, safety concerns, that it's developed in a safe way, you know, if it's connected to the greater grid. So these are all the things that we have to figure out. So I'm not really answering your question, but it's the whole point of this is to figure out these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I saw Joan's hand up go a moment before me. Joan, did you have something you want to add first?
I do, but you're the one that can really answer this. I just want to say at PRPA, these are the discussions that we're having. And when I said earlier that it is the board that gives direction to Platte River, because we are the owners. The beauty of Platte River is that there are really only 4 users, 4 owners. Whereas if you go to Excel or another company, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of people. So if each city wanted to manage their own electricity in some of these bigger utility companies, I could see where that would be amazing. But the difference, the evolution here is that we are used to one type of energy coming to us, either from coal, not gold, I wish it was gold, coal and oil, gas. So we are users of electricity, but as we get to our renewable, we are going to be distributors of electricity as well. So it's going to be a two-way power thing. And I agree with David in that Longmont does not want to lose control of our electricity, our utility, whether it's the CSI, which is our billing system. But those are the discussions that we're having right now on PRPA. So take it away, David.
I think Joan at the beginning of this meeting said she's only attended 30 meetings at Platte River, but she is so dialed in already. She really said what I had wanted to point out is I think I can understand where you might have a concern with that. And certainly as we go to develop some local community solar gardens, we're really going to be looking at how they benefit locally, whether it benefits the electric system, whether it benefits the underserved. There's a variety of things that we take into our equation that are far beyond just cost or just location. But we really look at it from a community perspective, and that helps guide us. And I was also going to mention is that if some of that does go to Platte River, we've got a great input to that because we're one of the owners. We're a 27% owner. We have 2 out of 8 seats on the board, and Fort Collins and Loveland and Estes Park each have 2 seats. So it's completely different than an investor-owned utility, such as Xcel Energy or Black Hills, Xcel Energy or Black Hills Energy, where your ability to interact, engage, and influence, especially on community values, is so limited. That's not what we have here.
I just want to clear up one thing about microgrids. And I sort of glossed over, I assume that people knew what a microgrid is. I look at it as one example is solar plus storage. And it can be used for when the grid is down as backup and supplemental backup to, say, a generator that you already have, diesel powered generator. But it can run when the sky is blue and the grid is up in providing electricity back to the grid. So I just want to make sure that people understand a microgrid does both island mode when the grid is down and also as a distributed energy resource when the grid is up.
So there seems to be a lot of interest in the distributed community resource of this. And I guess the question would be, is there consideration being given to how, EVs and, EVs can be used as a local storage and community solar or just residential rooftop solar can be used to feed that. Is that part of the discussion? And I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yes. I think that some of the stuff is a little bit further out, but that's the whole point. We're talking microgrids can be anything from an individual, solar panels and a Tesla, some kind of local storage up to serving an entire community. The whole thing. How do we figure out where does it make sense to do it? I think it's really interesting that the U.S. military is using a lot of microgrids. It makes sense because then they are completely independent of having to have fuel truck supply lines. Puerto Rico, they've gone through so many hurricanes. And now that they're realizing that microgrids are a viable alternative to having a single, depending on a single large utility. I think that you can use that. I think, David has already said, and I completely agree with him, that the most cost-effective electric generation is in the larger scale, the utility grade solar and wind generation. But there's places where it makes sense to do other kinds of technology, other kinds of installations.
Excellent, thank you. David?
I can add to it a little bit. Tracy definitely added some great examples where it's almost absolutely essential that you have to have some sort of microgrids or really the ability to island, whether it's, you're in hurricane areas or whether you're military and remote type areas, or there's a lot more of that going on in the mountains of California, where because of the number of years intensity of fires that have been up there, they have whole communities that they're having to shut off for days. And so they're getting really thoughtful on how to create a several day microgrid for some of those areas to be able to shut off during the fire, right? And yet those communities remain whole as long as they're safe. When you start to get down to like EVs and storage, those are all on the table for discussion, back to like we talked about building a roadmap and moving forward. And there are certain technical considerations with it right now. And those I see as not the barriers. that's part of the information that informs us of how to craft that type of solution going forward. And I think from a utility perspective, we can be more effective at serving this community when we have better input as to what these resources are and where, and how will they behave. Because how they behave starts to inform us of what can we really count on, and if we can count on some of those tools, then what are the other remaining things we have to do versus, yes, in a worst case or a reasonable example, those aren't going to be available. So then we have to sort of design around it. But that's where it's good information today, but we use it to evolve.
Excellent. So, you know, the advocates here and, you know, renewable energy enthusiasts all want to know, when might a roadmap be ready? When will we see our first roadmap?
So we're,
So
I'll
first
let
of all,
Tracy go. I want to hear her answer first.
okay, yeah, Hospital 12:49 next Thursday in the Energy Environment Committee. Okay, so just hang in there, but the draft, it will be published in January 2025. Now, I've heard a lot, wait a minute, why is it so long? It's because of all the things we talked about here. We need to have that robust stakeholder analysis. We need to really figure out and prioritize those critical facilities, those critical communities, and figure out all these issues that Joan brought up about people, lower income folk saddled with, I shouldn't say saddled. They don't have the same resources to put solar on their homes and things like that. So it is going to take a while, but I think it doesn't prevent any microgrids from being developed right now. It's just we're going to be smarter about it.
Excellent. David, anything to add?
Oh, gosh, golly, great question. So we are in the process of writing a request for proposals. That's really like the first step, so that we can have engineering firms sort of bid or offer their recommendations of what that roadmap would look like. I would say that the roadmap would probably be 12, maybe 18 months out. But one, it doesn't preclude us from doing other things. And we've been talking about those other things. These demonstration projects are really to get ready. Sort of like the staging to go fast. You're getting all the materials, you're going to build something in your house, you're at Home Depot, you're getting everything in there, you're storing in your basement. And the moment you get that permit or the roadmap together, you can actually act with intent. The other thing too is that lines up when we should have most of all the AMI meters online, because data is data is data is data, and that will help inform us how and where to do those things. So we're trying to line those all up together so that they come together and that we're well positioned with our staffing, our knowledge, and our budgetary to take action.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So last talking point or last discussion point, we've talked a lot about generation and how the last 10% is the hardest, it's the hardest part of the job. So where does efficiency fit in our plans for reaching 100% renewable energy? And can that be part of bridging that last 10%? David?
Pick me. Wonderful question. So first, I just want to touch on the 10% for just 1 second. When you think about 10%, it's not necessarily generation. It's generation, storage, shaving, preloading. You might actually consume more than, quote, 100% energy because you put some into, say, your water heaters or cooling or other things when you were synchronized, right? And it was a good time to store that energy for later when it starts to get dark or calm. So it's all these different tools we're talking about that come together to create this flexible 10 or so percent. When it comes to efficiency, that is always part of your equation. So that is something that we always take into account, that we continue to promote. We have Efficiency Works, where all the 4 cities of Platte River have sort of combined a lot of their resources to put that together. So if you haven't had a home efficiency audit, get that audit. There are things that you can go online right now with Platte River, order them, and they should be discounted from other things that you're going to get. Our goal is to really keep to about 1 to 1.5% load growth. And that's in a period that the load is otherwise going up higher with all our development, but we have to make sure that we're pushing hard into efficiencies and conservation elements to keep that load growth, so your goal over time doesn't get unachievable because you just let it, spiral upward out of control as far as the amount of energy you needed.
I just like to say that in general, one piece of information was stuck with me from a conference I went to last summer. 50% of what it's going to take us to get to, a clean future, is it energy efficiency. You need to eat your energy efficiency vegetables before you have the rest of your meal. I mean, that really, really is it. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I'll give my personal story. I have like 12 kilowatts of solar power on here. We want to put in a ground source heat pump, and but we're looking at how we have to make our house less leaky. So that's the first thing we're going to do is to improve the efficiency of our house before we spend money on a some kind of heat pump.
Great. Well, it's been an awesome discussion. Thank you all so much for taking part. I always like to give an opportunity for any final comments. Tracy, David, Joan, any last words?
We're in it together. I look forward to working with you towards our goal.
We all need you. We need you. You give me the wind in my sails. So I hope to see you soon testifying in favor of House Bill 1249.
Yep, I agree with both of you. We have to constantly work on this, and it's going to be exciting, fun, and a bit scary. So yeah, I'm real excited about the future for all of us.
Indeed. Representative Bernett, Mayor Peck, David Hornbacher, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. To all the attendees, thank you for your questions. And this will be posted on YouTube tomorrow morning. You'll be able to access the link from SRL's website, and we'll put it out on social media as well. And with that, I will say good night.
Good night, all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Mm-hmm.